"Oh, well, let her sleep," said Maria Dmitrievna, and she left the room, thinking Natasha must have dropped off, but she hadn't. Her starting eyes glazed out vansitily from her pale face. She never slept a wink all night long. She didn't cry, and she never said a word to Sonia, who got up several times and went in to see her. Next day, Count Rostov arrived back from his estate as promised. In time for lunch, he was in a very good mood, being on the point of agreeing terms with the purchaser, and there was nothing to keep him in Moscow away from his countess, and he had begun to miss that Natasha had been quite poorly the previous day, but they had sent for the doctor, and now she was feeling better. Natasha had not left the room all morning. With pitched, cracked lips and dry, staring eyes, she sat by the window uneasily, watching people drive past down the street, round nearly anyone. Who entered the room. She obviously waiting for news of him, waiting for him to come or at least write to her. When the Count walked in to see her, she turned uneasily at the sound of this man's heavy tread, and her face resumed its earlier cold, even vindictive expression. She didn't even get up to greet him. "What is it? Are you ill?" asked the Count. Natasha was silent for a moment. "Yes, I am," she answered. When the Count asked anxiously why she was so depressed and whether anything had happened to her fiancé, she had assured him that nothing had, and told him not to worry. To Maria Dmitrievna, firm Natasha's insistence that nothing had happened, this imaginary illness, his daughter agitated state, in the embarrassment written all over the faces of Sonia and Maria Dmitrievna, told the Count all over the faces of Sonia and Maria Dmitrievna, told the Count all too clearly that something must have happened while he had been away, but it was just too awful for him to imagine that anything scandalous might have something happen to his beloved daughter, and he valued his present good humor and peace of mind so much that nothing very unusual could have happened. His only regret being that her indisposition would delay that return to the country. Ever since the day of the wife's arrival in Moscow, Pierre had been intending to leave town, if only to get away from her. Shortly after the Rostov's arrival, the deep impression when Pierre got back to Moscow, he was handed a letter from Maria Dmitrievna asking him to call because something very important happened. Been avoiding Natasha. He could sense that his feelings towards her were stronger than ought to be between a married man and a young girl engaged to one of his friends. But somehow fate kept bringing them together. What had happened now? What do they want? What do they want me for? He kept thinking as he dressed to go to Maria Dmitrievna. Oh, Prince Andrei would hurry up and come home and get married to her. Thought Pierre on the journey there. Pierre, why did you get back? Called a familiar voice. Pierre looked up. A sled by flew behind a pair of trotting grays and kicking up the snow all over the front board. It was Anatole and his constant companion of Makarin. Anatole was sitting bolt upright in the classic pose of a dashing army man. The lower part of his face muffled in a behavior collar, and his head bent slightly forward. His face was French and glowing. His hat sported with white feathers and sat at his Johnny Angel, showing off pomaded curls with a sprinkling of fine snow. Now that's what I call worldly wisdom, thought Pierre. He can't see beyond the pressure of the moment. Nothing worries him, so he's always happy and contented. What wouldn't I give him to be like him? He full of envy. In Maria Dmitrievna entry hall, as the footman helped Pierre off with his coat, he said that his mattress wanted him to go up to her bedroom. As he opened the hall door, Pierre caught a brief glimpse of Natasha sitting by the window looking thin, pale, and crabby. She glanced around at him and left the room with an air of icy oldness. What happened? Asked Pierre, going into Maria Dmitrievna's room. A nice turn of events, answered Maria Dmitrievna. 58. years I've lived on this earth and never seen anything so disgraceful. And after making Pierre swear not to breathe a word of what was to follow, Maria Dmitrievna told him that Natasha had broken off her engagement without telling her parents, all because of Anatole Kuragin, Pierre's wife, having to bring two of them together. Natasha had tried to elope with him while her father was away and get married in secret. Pierre sat there with his shoulders hunched and his mouth wide opening, listening to what Maria Dmitrievna had to say, and he could hardly believe his ears. What Pierre was saying, beloved fiancé, and after making Pierre swear to not breathe a word of what to follow, Maria Dmitrievna told him that Natasha had broken off her engagement without telling her parents, all because of Anatole's Kuragin, Pierre's wife, having brought two of them together, and Natasha had tried to elope with him while her father was away and get married in secret. Pierre sat there with his shoulders hunched and his mouth wide open, listening to what Maria Dmitrievna had to say. He could hardly believe his ears. What Princess Andrei, beloved fiancée Natasha Rostova, always such a charming girl, who had given up Bolkonsky for that fool Anatole, who was already married? Pierre knew his secret, fell in love with him, and agreed to elope. It was beyond Pierre's imagination or understanding. The lovely image of Natasha that was so dear to his soul, and he had grown her since childhood, didn't fit with his new picture of her as someone deprived, stupid, and cruel. He saw of his own wife. They're all the same, he told himself, reflecting that he was not the only man to be tied by the unhappy hand of fate to a dreadful woman, but even so he could have wept for Prince Andrei, wept for his bride, and the more he felt for his friend, the more his feeling of the contempt and revolution grew as he thought of Natasha, who had just walked past him with that air of icy aloofness. What do you mean, get married? Pierre, when he heard Maria Dmitrievna's words, he can't get married. He's married already. It never rains, but it pours, said Maria Dmitrievna. What a splendid young man, absolutely swelling, and she's still expecting him to come. She had been waiting for 2 days. Please, God, stop with her waiting for him. We must tell her. Once Prince Pierre had told her all about Anatole's marriage, and she had vented her thoroughly in the strongest language. Maria Dmitrievna got around to let Pierre know why she had sent for him. She was terrified that either Count Rostov or Prince Volkonsky, who might arrive at any moment, could easily vented her thoroughly in the strongest language. Maria Dmitrievna got round to letting Pierre know why she had sent for him. She was terrified that either Count Rostov or Prince Volkonsky, who might arrive at any moment, could easily get to know about his affair. Despite her best efforts to conceal it and challenge Kuragin to a duel, so she hoped out of Moscow with clear instructions never to darken the door again. Pierre promised to do what she wanted, suddenly recognizing the danger that threatened the old Count and Nicholas and Prince Andrei. After outlining her wishes in a few present words, take a poo. Instead of staying to dinner, Pierre drove away immediately. After leaving Natasha's room, he skirted the town in search of Anatole Kuragin. At the very thought of this man, the blood rushed to his heart, and he could not hardly breathe. He was nowhere to be found on the ice hills. At the glimpse, when Pierre drove to the ice hills, Pierre drove to a club, and there it was just like a normal day with the members coming, went on talking about the city and the latest news. A footman who, accustomed to Pierre's friends and habits, greeted him and said several things. A place had been left for him in the small dining room. Prince Mikhail Zakharich was in the library. Had not yet come in. One of Pierre's acquaintance broke off from chatting about the weather to ask if he heard about Kurgan's abduction of young Countess Rostov, which was the talk of the town, but was at true. Pierre laughed off as a bit of nonsense, having just come from the Rostov, and had asked Anatole. One man said he wasn't in yet. Another said he was expected for dinner. It felt strange for Pierre to look around at the quiet crowd of uninvolved people who had no knowledge of what tomorrow his spirit was going through. He wandered from room to room, waited for everyone to arrive, and then, with no sign of Anatole, he abandoned dinner and set off for home. His prayer. Anatole was dining at that day when Dolokhov and the pair of them were trying to work out the plan, how the plan had ended in favor could be made to succeed. According to Anatole, it was vital for him to see Natasha, so that evening he went round to his sister to discuss her how another meeting could be arranged. I need to go poo. Pierre completely ignored his wife, even though he hadn't seen her since his return. At that moment, he loathed her more than ever. Strode into the drawing room, spotted Anatole, and went over to him. "Oh, hello, Pierre," said the Countess, coming over to her husband. "You've no idea what had predicament Anatole finds himself in." She stopped short at the sight of her husband's lowered head, the fire in his red eye, and the absolute dread. She had recognized the look. "Whenever you are there's bound to be vice and evil, said Pierre to his wife. Anatole, come with me. I want a word with you, he said in French. Anatole glanced around at his sister, but got to his feet, completely ready to follow Pierre. Pierre grabbed him by the arm, jerked him forward, and walked out of the room. Please, not in my drawing room, Helen whispered, but there was no response from Pierre. My dear fellow, asked Anatole in French, as I do not feel obligated to answer questions addressed to me in that tone of voice. Pierre's face, already pale and now contorted with rage, with one huge hand, he grabbed Anatole by the collar of his uniform and proceeded to shake him from other side to side, but until a significant degree of terror had registered on his face. OP. Of his feet. He had picked up a heavy paperweight and was now weighing it ominously. But he soon had put it back down again. Did you promise to marry her? I never thought that. I didn't actually, because Pierre cut short. You got any letters from her? Have you got any letters? Pierre repeated his question, bearing down on Anatole. Anatole took one look at him, suffered his hand in his pocket, and took out a wallet. Pierre took the proffered letter, showed a table of the way, and flopped down on the sofa. Don't worry, I'm not going to get violent, said Pierre in response to Anatole's gesture. But how can I? In 3, Pierre ignored him and went on. You never breathed a word of what went on between you and the young countess. I know I can't stop you, but if you have a grain of conscience. Pierre paced up and down the room several times without saying anything. Anatole sat there at the table, scowling and biting his lips. When all said and I'm done, surely you can get it into your head that there is such a thing as other people's happiness and peace of mind beyond your own pleasure. Can't you see you're running someone whose life just for a bit of fun? Go and amuse yourself with a woman like my wife. You're all within your rights. There. They know. They know. what you want from them. When they... God. Well, I'm not too sure about that, said Anatole, regaining self-confidence as Pierre controlled his fury. I'm not too sure about that, and I don't want to be said, he said, avoiding Pierre's eyes and speaking with a slight humor of the jaw. But you've called me names sordid like a sex life, which a man of honor I can't accept anymore. Pierre looked at him in amazement, at a loss to understand what could possibly want. I know it's all been in private, Anatole protested, but I'm afraid I can't. What is your certification? Pierre said, certification. Well, the least you could do is take it back. What if you're asking me to do what you want? How about that? Yes, I'll take it all back, said Pierre. And please forgive me. Pierre could take his eyes off the dangling button. And yes, there's some money too. You might need it for the journey. Anatole smiled. The look on his face, the mean, crinkling smile that he knew was well from the last straw. For Pierre, you're a vital and callous breed, he cried and stormed out of the room. The next day, Anatole left for Petersburg. Pierre drove around to let Maria Dmitrievna know that her wishes Pierre drove round to let Maria Dmitrievna that her wishes had been carried out. Kuradin had been banished from Moscow. The whole horse was in a state of tumult and alarm. Natasha was very poorly, and Maria Dmitrievna told him why on the quiet once she had told Anatole that she was married. That same night he had poisoned herself with arsenic, which he had got hold of by some secret means. After swallowing just a little, she had become so scared and woken Sonia up and told her what she had done. The necessary antidotes had been administered in a good time, and now she was out of danger. But still too weak to even think of being taken back to the country. And the Countess had been sent for Pierre and saw the Count in his terrible distress, and Sonia constantly in tears, but he wasn't allowed to see Natasha. The next day, Pierre dined at the club and hear gossip on all sides about the attempted abduction of young Countess Rostov. He friendlessly dined all such stories, assuring everyone there was nothing in them beyond the fact his brother-in-law had proposed to Natasha and been refused had occurred to Pierre that his duty laid in covering up the whole affair, restoring the young countess' reputation after the dreading Prince Andrei's return. But every day he drove round to the old prince to catch up on the latest news about him. Madame Bourrienne had kept old Principal Konski abreast of all the humors flying about the town, and he had read the note to Princess Maria in which Natasha had broken off with the engagement. He seemed more cheerful than usual, and he couldn't wait to see his son again. Anatole left the room and came to a move on. A few days later, after Anatole's departure, Pierre received a note from Prince Andrei letting him know he was back and inviting him over. The first thing his father did when Prince Andrei arrived home in Moscow was handed over Natasha's note to Princess Maria, breaking off the engagement. Madame Bourrienne had flinched the note from Princess Maria and handed it on to the old prince. From his father's lips, he heard a rather embellished account of Natasha's employment. Prince Andrei had arrived in the evening, and Pierre had come to see him the very next morning. He was expecting to find that Prince Andrei invertedly the same state as Natasha, and so it came as a surprise him to walk into the drawing room and heard the sound of Prince Andrei's voice in the study, holding forth unsustainably on the subject of some affair going on up in Petersburg. The old prince and some other voices kept cutting across him. From time to time, Princess Maria came out to meet Pierre. She signed, looking back towards the door of the room where Prince Andrei was talking in an obvious gesture of sympathy for him. All his grief, but Pierre could tell from her face that she was pleased by what had happened. Going on Petersburg, the old prince had some other voices kept cutting across him from time to time. Princess Maria came out to meet Pierre. A few days after Anatole's departure, Pierre received a note from Prince Andrei letting him know he was back and inviting him over. The first thing his father did when Prince Andrei arrived home in Moscow was hand over Natasha's note to Princess Maria, breaking off the engagement. Madame Bourrienne had flinched the note from Princess Maria and handed it on to the old prince. From his father's lips, he had heard another embellished account of Natasha's employment. Prince Andrei had arrived in the evening, and Pierre had come to see him the very next morning. He was expecting to find Prince Andrei in virtually the same state as Natasha, and so it was a surprise for him to walk and hear the sound of Prince Andrei's voice in the study, holding forth intellectually on the subject of some affair going on up in Petersburg, the old town, and some other voice kept cutting across him from some time to time. Hi.
Goodbye.
Prince Andrei had arrived in the evening, and Pierre had come to see him the very next morning. He was expecting to find Prince Andrei in virtually the same state as Natasha, and so it came as a surprise for him to walk into the drawing room and hear the sound of Prince Andrei's voice in the study, holding forth occasionally on the subject of some affair going on up in Petersburg. The old prince and some other voice kept cutting across him from time to time. Prince Maria came out to meet Pierre. He signed, looking back towards the door of the room where Prince Andrei was talking, in an obvious gesture of sympathy for him in all his grief, but Pierre could tell from her face that she was pleased by what had happened, and also by her brother's acceptance to his fiancée and faithfulness. He has been saying expecting